Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UK WVD Usergroup meeting. This is our second ever meeting, so if it doesn't all go to plan, blame me. So today on our agenda, we've got Neil and Kirk. Kirk can't join us today, unfortunately, so he's got a family emergency, so it's just going to be me. So if things do go wrong, it's solely my responsibility. So I'm going to give you a bit of an intro about what's new with WVD this month. And then we've got Jim Moyle with us, who works for Microsoft as a global black belt. So he's going to be telling us all about image management and in WVD, and also he's going to give an update on FS Logic's compacting scripts. And then after that, we've got Samit Halvadia from Remote Free. He's going to give you an update on his product and how you can use it for accelerating application modernization. So I'll go through the introductions. So I'm Neil. I've been around for a while. I work for a company called Usergroup as a senior Citrix and WVD architect. Been around in Citrix VDI world for probably about 10 years. Probably around Azure WVD about 12 months. I run the WVD community as well, which is a global brand now. So we've got user groups worldwide, of which this is one. We also have a website, a podcast, and we publish videos as well. So check that out if you want to look at stuff on WVD. So wvdcommunity.com. You can also find us on all the podcasts as well. So I'm a Citrix CTA and also a Microsoft MVP. You can find me on Virtual Mac, Twitter, and WVD Community. Virtual Mac.uk is my website, and wvdcommunity.com is the community website, and that's my LinkedIn profile as well. This is Kirk. Everyone say hi to Kirk. He can't be joining us, so I'll whiz through that. And I did this last time, but I'll just quickly run through those just so you know, in case anyone's here for the first time. So this got started around April. It was Christian Brinkhoff's idea originally. And well, it was my idea to do a newsletter, and then we're basically growing it all from there. So now we've got 9 user groups worldwide. We've got over 1,000 people on Twitter. We average at the moment nearly 5,000 page views a month on our website. We've got a Slack channel, which is now over 515 people. We've got over now is 1,000 podcast downloads, over 20 newspapers published. I really should update this. And we just recorded today number 11 of our podcast. So that's going to be good. We've got Thomas Poppergard on, so that'll be released out on Sunday. So that was quite a good conversation. So look out for that. History. So WVD community is made up of myself, a guy called Stefan Digamonze, who helps me run it, as well as Patrick Kohler. So we sort of run it as a group together, sort of help each other with the podcast and stuff. So you can check out those guys there. So we've also got user groups, which obviously this is one of. So we've got one in the UK. We've got the Dutch user group. We've got German, Belgium, Danish, Swedish, American, Australia, and Japan. Which I always find quite amazing because, say, we only started this in April, and we've got this already. So it's been quite a good growth. So what do you expect from these user group meetings? So we're going to meet once a month. We are going to present the latest WVD news and hot topics. We are going to be using Teams. Obviously, you're on Teams, and we are recording them, and the slides are going to be after the event. So we may do a physical event, but we're not too sure yet. But we'll see how that goes. Okay, so if there's anything you want to know, let us know. I don't want this to turn into I'm talking at you. We want to make this as interactive as possible. We have lots and lots of knowledge and experience of WVD on this user group. So if you need to know anything, ask away. Obviously, we've got Tom and Jim on from Microsoft. It's their job to help you. So if they're not helping you, we can get them sacked. So make sure they help you. Otherwise, it's not going to be good. That was a joke, by the way.
Very, very funny, Neil. I am laughing on the inside.
Good. Glad. So Slack channel, a really, really good resource. It's probably been our biggest success, I'd say. We've got over 500 people in there. 515 when I checked this morning. A lot of good conversations going on. We've got a feature there as well, feature requests. So if you want to request a WVD feature, Tom looks at that now and again and submits stuff to Microsoft. If you got something which you want to make the product better, or if you had a query, just jump on there. But yeah, if you need some general data advice about WVD, or if you've got a problem, check that out. So contact details. So this is the website, the Twitter address, which I don't really do much with that Twitter account at the moment. There's my email. So it's neil@wvdcommunity.com. And we are virtual mic. Actually, but you saw that before, so I'm not going to go over that too much. And obviously, that's Kirk's Twitter address as well. Okay, so on that, I'm going to go into the news. So let me just close this down, and I'm going to open up another one. Any questions so far? Let me have a check at the chat window because I noticed there was something. Then a Chicago one as well, is there? Okay, I didn't know that, is there? Good. Right. Let me put the news, and I will quickly run through this and share it. Open share tray. Okay, you can all see that, right?
Yep.
Good. So, what's we got new this month? Do you like my picture? It's good, right? Good.
Very nice.
Right. So basically, what I'm done with this, I've just taken a summary of my newsletter that I publish every week. So what have we got this month? So we have updated CLI commands. Obviously, with WVD, you can fully manage it by PowerShell, and the PowerShell commands are being updated constantly. I don't know if you're aware, but obviously with what they call the classic, what used to be the fall update, there was a separate PowerShell module. For the new Spring update, which is now Windows Virtual Desktop, the PowerShell commands are all contained within the Azure PowerShell command. So they've been updated to include new ones. So correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but it's these application group ones which are the new ones.
Yes, so there are others. That link there will take you through to the root of the CLI doc. So basically, you can do anything in the CLI.
Yep. Okay. Good. Just out of interest, I don't know about you guys, but what I've noticed is ever since Spring Update has come out, people seem to have stopped using the PowerShell commandlets. Obviously, full update, they were forced to use them. But what I've noticed is a lot of people are obviously, because the GUI is so good through the portal, you can do so much so easily. The PowerShell usage has kind of dropped off a bit, I would say. But we'll see how that goes. We've also got new clients as well. So one good thing that you will see with the WVD clients is that they are constantly updated. I think we're looking at every 2 weeks is an update at the moment. So they are fixing existing bugs and features and adding new features as well. So the client in the store has been updated, which is good, because I know historically they were running an older version in the store, which caused a few issues sometimes with customers, because sometimes, depending on the customer, sometimes they go straight to the store by default. rather than downloading the very latest version, which is normally on the website, but the still one's not been updated. So you can have a look at the new features in there. So there's quite a lot of new stuff in there, which is good. We've also got a updated normal client as well. So we're now at version 1.2.1272. So we've got new functionality. We've got some application fixes as well. So as you probably guys already know, the client generally auto updates itself. But it's good to just to know these issues. Another big one, which a lot of people have been waiting for, is the ARM templates have been updated for the Spring update. So if you use ARM templates for deployment, you can now use those again for the Spring update. So I've put the link in there for those. So at the moment, there's the virtual machines. Can't remember this two of them. I can't remember off the top of that, but there's two of them in there, which you can do. I think it's join a host pool and create a host pool, if I'm memory serves me right. So have a look at that link and have a play. This I found is if you are involved in the architecture and design of WVD or even administration, you have to check this out. There's lots of great information in here. It's basically, if you guys are aware of the cloud adoption framework that you have for Azure, which I know a lot of companies use as how they implement Azure. We now have similar for Windows Virtual Desktop. So there's a lot of information in there for your pre-sales guys if you need that. There's guidance on how to design your environment, what kinds of stuff to think about, and some basic principles. So if you're involved in design in any way, link, bookmark it, download the documents, stick it on your SharePoint site, use it as a reference. So this was a few days ago. So we've got updated gateway clusters. So they've been updated for United Kingdom, France, Norway, and South Korea. So as you know, when you connect into your desktops, you go through a gateway cluster. So obviously, the closer they are to your users, or the more bandwidth, the better your experience is going to be. So we've got new ones. As you can see, I tested this on mine and got pretty good round trip time. So 27 to 30 milliseconds latency, which is very, very good in my personal opinion. Generally, you're not going to notice any experience issues on that kind of low latency. So if you're in UK, France, Norway, South Korea, you might notice a bit of increased usability in your desktops. Also worth noting is there is a Microsoft Meets community event coming up. The last one was hugely successful. I think they had over 2,000 people. That's organised by Christian Brinkhoff. So if you want to know about WVD, check that out. There's a lot of really good sessions. Esther's doing one. I know Esther's on this call, so looking forward to that one. We've got Robin Hobo and Gert Jungil, how to spell that, and Benny Trich and Travis Roberts, which most of you know, obviously Peter Wiglivin, and myself and Stefan are going to be doing some information around host sizing and scaling. So that's going to be quite good. So yeah, that's on the 1st of September. You can check out that link to sign up for that and register. I think at the moment there's already over 1,000 people a week after it's released. So we're hoping it meets at least 2,000 this time again. Another useful resource is the Quick Start. So if you are anyway inclined to do automation and DevOps, or if you just want to get an environment up and running quickly, you have to check this out. It's also a really good learning thing, because basically what this does, it takes your environment from 0 to a full environment, including test accounts, everything, in like 30 minutes or something. Or you can just basically download it, look at it, and learn it and see what's happening. So it uses DevOps pipelines. I think it's Azure Image Builder as well. I'm not too sure, I can't remember. But yeah, definitely check it out. It'd be similar to what sort of Jim's going to teach us shortly. But it's complete automation. I see a lot of people mainly picking this up and expanding this and customizing it for their own environments. Obviously, everything is public and on GitHub. So you can download it, download the scripts, play with it, deploy your own environment, that kind of stuff. So very, very good resource to get up and running quickly, or just learn a bit more about all the scripts and DevOps and stuff and how it all integrates and stuff like that. We also have config manager support for WVD. So that's in 2006. So you can now, if you use config manager, you can now sort of publish updates to your desktops or create rules or whatever you want to do. I'm not a config manager expert, so I can't go into a lot of detail for this, but I've been told it's quite useful. And that is it really from the news from me. Is there anything, any questions, comments? Anything in the news? Yeah, okay. Good. Right. In that case, I am going to hand over to Jim. I'm going to stop sharing. Jim, you should be able to take control.
Let's see if I can do that in a sensible manner. How about that? Can you see my screen? Yes,
we can.
Wonderful. So the WVD Quick Start ADO Azure DevOps pipeline will take you to production of an entire WVD deployment, but it doesn't cover image management and it doesn't cover Azure Image Builder. So this would be super useful to combine with that and put them all together. So let's talk about automation and image management. I get a lot of questions around image management from partners, from smaller organizations right up to the very biggest organizations in the world. So it's obviously a hot topic for a lot of people. And why is it such a big thing for people? Well, essentially, people need to have a consistent environment. Now, whether that's consistent between VMs or consistent sort of between, you know, somebody with a laptop or somebody logging into a multi-session VM in Azure, it needs to be consistent across the environments. Everything needs to be patched. Everything needs to be secure. We all know this, but we've also all seen environments where that hasn't happened and they're super behind in terms of patching and security. Consistency, like I say, physical, virtual. So whether Windows 10 is on a laptop, on a desktop, in your data center, or multi-session in Azure, everything needs to be consistent, not just for the OS, but for the applications as well. And you also need to respond in a timely fashion to your organization, right? So we've all seen places where you walk in and you say, what is that? They say, well, that's our XenApp 6.5 farm. We haven't touched it since we got somebody in to deploy it several years ago. And nobody touches it now because they don't know how it works. Nobody wants to be in that sort of situation. We all want to be able to respond to the business to make sure that when features are needed, we can add them when we want. Pooled versus personal. Personal is almost always managed traditionally. And by traditionally, I don't mean SCCM. I mean by the same methods that you manage a desktop on somebody's desk. Because it's single session Windows 10. And in almost all cases, the organization has got a method already in place for managing those physical desktops. I would just replicate that into Azure. Trying to think of different ways to do it is going to end up in a lot more complexity than really you want. So keep the sort of in inverted commas, traditional way of managing those, i.e. align it with the other single session Windows 10 you have in your environment, which is constantly online, which is those desktops. So I'm much more interested in talking about pooled, because pooled is where it's at in terms of management efficiencies, where it's at in terms of consistency, etc., etc. We could update once in the master image, and then we know, because everything is based on that, and we can roll out those VMs, that everything's the same. Yeah. Given that we now have several master images, let's say we have some lifecycle master images, we know that we can go back to the last one very easily, and we don't troubleshoot. We can reset to known good anytime we like on any VM we like, and get it back to a working state as fast as possible. Now, a lot of you on this call will be familiar with all of these concepts because you'll have done them on premises. But we're going to talk about some Azure specific stuff and maybe some stuff that you haven't run into before. So how often do organizations update? I'd like just stick in the chat and I'll have a look at it when I can later, that how often you guys update. So this is sort of what I've seen happen, right? That pulled master image updated once every sort of 1 to 3 months with all the latest applications and patches. And this will only happen if they've got a reliable process. A reliable process does not have to mean automated, but it most often does. So if you've got some good skills and you've got people who can write everything down in a great way and keep it updated, fine, you can do it manually. There's nothing wrong with that. Just be aware that usually it will eventually fail. I've seen organizations which are in that situation where, you know, somebody else has put it in and left the premises, and that's it. Only security patches go on, and everybody's totally hands off, and you don't get that ability to respond to the business. And I've seen completely the other way, where you've got an application which needs to be installed, but it has updated data constantly, and you need to update that application all the time. So I've seen people who need to update that golden image and roll it out many times a week. What else are customers asking for? Well, they want it. So at the top and the bottom here are exactly opposite, which is always fun when you're talking to different customers. So you may fall into or between these two opinions, right? First one is they want an integrated stack, right? One tool for physical virtual cloud. That's a great idea, right? You're not doing stuff in a different way. You only require one set of skill sets for one job, and you're not using 2 different tools to do one job depending on where that OS is. Appreciate that. A lot of people are asking for a Microsoft stack as much as possible, and then only breaking out to partners like Citrix or VMware when necessary. I do find that a lot of implementations do require some partner interactions. We're going to hear from Remo 3 from Samit later about their excellent MSIX conversion and testing technologies. And then we have the people who say, well, actually, what's the point in going to cloud if I'm just going to extend all my on-prem infrastructure and just run it the same way? I don't want to do that. What I want is consumption-based pricing for services, or free if possible, and I want it to be cloud native. Yeah, I don't want to be paying for and building out a whole lot of IaaS to stick my on-prem infrastructure into Azure. Now, how do I do this, right? In pooled, every login is the first logon, right? So to keep logon time down, per user processing to a absolute minimum. If it's universal, stick it in the image. Because obviously you can have different update timings for the image in the applications, well, AppV and MSX app attach can be used to update apps separately and then assign them on a per user basis. Just because you've got a good application deployment strategy doesn't mean you don't need a good image management strategy. You can't ignore your image just because you've got 98% of your apps in AppV and that's all great. You still need to be able to control and automate your image management. Everybody likes to have one master image, right? One golden image. How many golden images do you have? Well, maybe you have different languages you need to cater for. Maybe you need to have an image in different regions so you can quickly roll out host pools from that image. Maybe you have departmental images where you have installed apps that aren't appropriate for all users. You may have a legacy app that you need to stick on Windows 7. We have solutions for that. It's called the App Azure program, by the way. You may have moved up some VMs from on-prem and have some server OSs, so different OSs. You may be doing some remote apps, and so you've got application silos for your remote apps because you've got different versions of different applications you need to have available to your users. And we mentioned before that lifecycle stuff, the current test, maybe a couple of rollbacks. All of these need to be accounted for. You've got 3 languages, 5 regions, 4 departments in 3 lifecycle. Well, that's 180 different images that you have to cope with. You start to see how having all of this automated and controlled is a really good idea. Now, everybody knows that very recently this year, people have rushed to desktop virtualization. And it's the one occasion where speed has been more appropriate than doing things right, shall we say. And I've seen a lot of people go into this with that manual build or a checklist build because of that speed which was necessary to stand up that remote working infrastructure. Understandable under the circumstances. A lot of people are now coming round and going, okay, well, we need to keep this infrastructure, but we need to optimize it. Okay, now we need to start automated. Now we need to take the manual build out of it. We're finding these tasks repetitive and error prone, and we need to improve our infrastructure. There's a whole lot of tooling you can get for this. So this is your update management, System Center, now called Endpoint Manager, Intune. There's ARM templates. So Neil showed us the 2 new ARM templates for the current release for WVD. There's Azure Image Builder. We're going to talk about that quite a lot actually over the coming few slides. There's MDT, very old tech, but we'll talk about that a little bit, and I'll tell you why soon. And then of course, there's loads of great partners, great third-party options. Just to show you the new bit in System Center Configuration Manager, Windows 10 multi-session now supported. So if we look at this in terms of a flowchart of what we want to do. So if you're an admin of a WVD environment, you want to be able to create an image, replicate that image around the world, and then create host pools from that image that's stored locally inside your region. It'd be nice if you didn't have to drop down to PowerShell to do it every single time, and you just had a nice web front end. Maybe then you could delegate that task to somebody else when you need to produce an image. And it should be 0 touch, right? So once you put the data into that web front end, then you can pass it out to, you'll end up with a host pool at the end that somebody can log into. So if we think about that flow and how we'd achieve that. Now, this isn't the only way to do it, and we'll talk about some other ways to do it in as we're going through this. But this is a way I did it for a customer using the technology that we see in front of us. Now, they wanted a web form, so we used a Power App for that, because that could tie into their subscription, secure behind a login, and we could actually pull details through from their environment and then pre-fill bits of the app for them. They also wanted to be able to do it on a schedule. Obviously, monthly would be nice, so that they can kick a image build off, drag down all of the application and OS updates, deploy it to a test host pool, get their Canary users on it, zero touch. They also wanted to tie it into some application updates, so that if a certain application came out with a new version, and that would also kick off a new image build, kick off a new host pool, and then assign those test users to that host pool. So those three triggers, the web form, the schedule, and the application update, all feed into a logic app. The logic app then kicks off an Azure function, which controls Azure Image Builder. Now, part of that Azure Image Builder step, it's getting artifacts from Azure files. It's using the MDT toolkit to do customization of that image, and using Key Vault to store the secrets and credentials, etc., that we needed for the image build. MDT is an interesting choice here. Now, Azure Image Builder has got its own customization logic. We decided for this customer to use MDT because that is what they already had on-prem, and they wanted to reuse all of that IP that they had on-prem. Chocolatey, Ansible, whatever you decide, just pure PowerShell scripting, equally valid in that step of customization for Azure Image Builder. Image Builder will then kick that image out that's been customized into the shared image gallery. Shared image gallery will automatically give you replication around the world to wherever you need that image to be in Azure. Not only that, it will also version that image for you too. So now you can see how you've got that age-old problem of how do I replicate my golden image around the world, and how do I version it so I can step back to different previous versions. Then we're using some more logic to kick off another Azure function, where we're using PowerShell to deploy host pools and kick over the users. So let's step into the Azure Image Builder part of that that chain. So it's currently in public preview. Hopefully it will be GA soon, but I don't have a date for you on that as yet. But it is feature complete. It's a question of getting it deployed around the globe in terms of where it's going to, when it's going to GA. So if you start to use it now, any code or anything that you create now will be just as valid for GA as it is now. So there's three steps: grabbing the source, customizing it, and distributing it. We can grab the source as that gallery image that we're all familiar with, I hope. So we could say, let's get 2004 with Office 365 Pro Plus and use that as our source. So nice and pristine, updated image. But of course, that's no good for us. We need to have our own applications in there, hence the customizer step. That will allow you to patch, to reboot, to install applications, a whole load of different tasks that are available to you in there. And then, as we say, distribute. Straight to a VHD if you want, or a managed image, or what we're most interested in is to the shared image gallery. And then obviously you create your VMs in your host pools from there. These are the current regions in preview for Azure Image Builder. Doesn't mean you're limited to there. You can build your images anywhere and distribute them anywhere. So more around data sovereignty than anything else. Functionally, it doesn't really matter. if you're familiar with Azure, you'll be familiar with some JSON. You can use ARM, you can use AZ, you can use PowerShell, and you can use Azure DevOps pipelines. The Azure DevOps pipelines are very interesting. So there's a Azure Image Builder specific artifact for ADO or Azure DevOps, and we can integrate that. Now, I haven't in the demo here, but for the next few projects where I'm going to be helping customers out with this, I will absolutely be using an ADO pipeline, as long as the customer's happy with that, of course, to build that out. Using the MDT kit, there's a couple of things I want to pull out here. So there's the top there says run Evergreen. Evergreen is a great PowerShell module created by a good friend of mine, Aaron Parker. It allows you to go and get the latest versions of a whole lot of common end user computing apps, including FSLogix, actually. Essentially, because you want to be, or at least I would, getting all the latest app versions so we can go and test those when you're building the image. You don't have to. Obviously, you could host the specific binaries inside Azure, and then you can do your specific versions of applications if you want. But I like going and getting the latest ones. We can see that we can actually talk to storage. We can talk to whatever we like, because we can attach a VNet during the customization phase, and hence we can reach out to other areas and drag in whatever we need. And as part of this, there's a language installation step as well. And then once we've customized it, then we replicate it across to wherever we need those images to be. So this is just Microsoft Forms, the least secure thing that you can possibly do. But I couldn't use the customer's Power App to do this. So let's have a look at how this works. All we're going to do is gather some basic information. Now, bear in mind with that is not playing. For demos, if we can't get any of them to show. Does this one play? No. Amazing. Wow, that's going to be fun, isn't it?
Jim, in the progress bar, it says cannot play media.
Does it? Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I wonder why that is. Let me open a previous version of this and see if that's any better. It says that the codec is unavailable, which is very interesting. So let's see if I can find the original MP4s of this. I can look at that. All right. So now we're filling out the information needed. Number of VMs, subscription ID, shared image gallery name, and we can even do, when we're gathering information here, we can pick the languages as well. Oop, wrong video. This is why it helps to have them played into slides, right? All right. And now we can see that we're picking up from the form that we've got a new response, because we've got a trigger when a form is submitted. That response has ID of 19. We're going to stick 19 into a variable, and we're going to use it to get the response details. So this is just getting the inputs from the form, and it's sticking it into JSON format. JSON format is really handy, because what we can do is we can use that JSON information to start the Azure function with the correct information. We can also use recurrence, and we can add effectively a service bus to get multiple triggers to start a single logic app and send a message down the service bus. So this is the Azure function. Now I've got it running here in VS Code, or it's not actually running VS Code. I'm streaming the logs from this function running in Azure. So this has been triggered by the logic app. And we can see that those exact same logs are in log analytics that I'm streaming down locally. We can see that Azure Image Builder is doing its thing. So we've got a new resource group. And we've also got a staging resource group. So Azure Image Builder uses staging resource group for a few things. One of them is there's a storage account in there which has the logs for the customization and image deployment step of Azure Image Builder. If you're familiar with Terraform and Packer, then these logs will look very familiar to you. The reason being is that Azure Image Builder, like Terraform, uses Packer for image deployment underneath. In fact, in terms of controlling Azure Image Builder, and if you got Packer code that you already have, then that Packer code will actually work for Azure Image Builder as well. So we can see the customization log for that image in that storage account. And if we look right at the beginning of that log, you can see that's 2022. At the end, 5 to 2. So it's only taken us 40 minutes. Now, depending on how many customizations you have, then that may take a lot longer. There's not many customizations in this particular demo. Azure Functions max time is 5 minutes. They're not meant to be long running. They're meant to be scale out and short. So if you want to have Azure Functions control this, what you need to do is you need to run it, start AIB, and then stop the Azure function. Because the max time is either 5 or 10 minutes if you pay extra for the runtime for Azure Functions. Now then, we can also have a look at the REST command for starting a function. And this is now, once that image has been deployed to the shared image gallery, I'm actually going to start this manually, as we could see, because we can actually troubleshoot Azure Functions locally in VS Code. Super useful to do. We just saw that. And now effectively from the second Azure function, we've got a Windows 10 VM sitting in a host pool, ready to be logged onto. So that is end-to-end, zero-touch automation for building your image, deploying your host pools. And that is completely repeatable. And next time you run it, it will go out and grab the latest version of Windows from the gallery. It will grab the latest version of the applications from the net and build it all automatically. If you're wondering how we got the languages to work, because if you know languages, they're a bit of a pain. You need to have the cab files available on an Azure storage account. Not all features on demand are available or appropriate for every single language. So you need to be able to query that Excel sheet, which I've turned into a CSV for this particular script, and then it will look at all the cab files and install the correct languages. There's a couple of steps after that, but this will do the majority of the heavy lifting for you in terms of getting those different languages installed in your golden image. And we can see that we've got all of the features on demand for that language installed there. That's on my personal GitHub account, and you feel free to go and download that code for installing languages. All right, so now that we've opened up a million media player windows, let's go back to PowerPoint. Past all the lovely videos that don't play. Amazing. And that was, there we go. That's actually an old load of slides, isn't it? Because I decided to have a look at an old version to try and make the video works, but videos work. So let's get the one version of slides that I have for you today. All this code is available on GitHub. It is at the moment completely undocumented, but feel free to go and nick it. The PowerShell has been updated since I dumped all of this code into GitHub, as in the module has been updated. So it's actually much simpler to do than I had to do for this particular deployment. But I hate it when people show something and say, it's not quite ready. I'll put it on GitHub and you can have it, later, and then either you forget or they forget and you never get to see the code. At least it's there for you to go and nick if you want to do so. So that was Azure Image Builder, an automated deployment. Like I say, I think that in the future, instead of functions, I'll be using the DevOps pipeline. You can reuse the PowerShell code inside a DevOps pipeline by doing an Azure CLI build rather than the Azure Image Builder. So you can still do it completely in PowerShell, like I've shown. There's various ways to do it, but I like the idea of the pipeline because you can do, gated actions. You can request for permission, and somebody can reply and say yes, go on or not. It's I think it's more suited to the type of deployment that we want to do than using Azure functions. But it's up to you. There's a couple of ways of skinning that cat. Talking about stuff that I has written, I wanted to talk a little bit about the tool that I've written for shrinking FSLogic's disks. This is not part of my job. I don't work for FSLogix anymore, so this is just a community effort. But people started coming to me a lot saying, I want to shrink my FSLogix disks, either because they were running out of space on their hardware because it's on-prem, and that would be a bad thing if they ran out of space, or they're running it in Azure and they needed to reduce their cost because they're doing consumption-based Now, let me show you the video that this working. As we know, videos are not doing well in PowerShell. We see at the bottom there's a whole load of VHDs, VHDXs, different sizes, different types, and we're just running the script with a path. We're going to say ignore less than 1 GB because we don't want to bother to shrink those. And as we go down, I put the path through so we get a nice object back from the script. And we can see that we're saving several gigs for each disk. These are all samples that people have sent to me kindly, so that I have something real to test against, because I don't actually have a large FSLogix environment of my own anymore. What we'll output from that is also a CSV file, which looks like that. So you can output an object, you can output a CSV file. You can also configure it to delete old VHDs, so delete older than a year. So if nobody's touched that VHD in a year, you can delete it. You can say if it's not going to give me a lot of optimization, then skip it, because the shrinking takes time. And if you have 40,000 disks, 80,000, 100,000 disks, and a short maintenance window, you need to make sure you're spending your time wisely in terms of saving the most space. With that in mind, I wrote the scripts to be multi-threaded. So running it from a beefy machine will give you better results. It's set to 8 threads simultaneously by default, but you can increase that to whatever you like. I would recommend double how many cores you have as a suggestion. It doesn't rely on drive letters, so you can have more simultaneous shrinks than you have letters free on your VM, which is a good thing. And I have multiple people who save multiple terabytes of capacity using the script. And Kirk from NetApp and their VDS product actually use my script in their product. So it's now part of the NetApp product, which is weird. And ControlUp are looking to include it in their product as well. But you can obviously download it from GitHub and get it for free, which is what I suggest you do if you need to shrink and recapture some capacity from your storage as your next step. I'm going to stop sharing now and have a look at Teams and see if there's a whole lot of questions about either the shrink or whatever else. Neil, have you been looking at the questions? Where am I?
Yes, I have. So do you need Hyper-V to run these scripts? Nope.
You don't. So they were originally, I used the Hyper-V module, but the Hyper-V module requires the Hyper-V role, which requires CPU virtualization to be enabled in the underlying hypervisor layer, which then may become troublesome if you're not in charge of the hypervisor layer. So people moaned a lot about needing the Hyper-V module, so I took that out.
Good. A lot of people are saying they're very interested to see you write a blog post about all this. How you got this to work?
I would probably be more likely to do a YouTube series on it rather than write blog posts. But yes, once I get it dialed in, I will absolutely record a series of videos on it.
Okay. Connor says he's using the shrink tool on multiple custom environments, but he never seems to be able to shrink profiles. He's currently having to use shrink FSL alongside this to get it to work. Are there any known issues?
I would be interested to know that in what that's happening. Have you had a look at the latest version? There's some improvements on shrinking VHDs. VHDs are harder to shrink than VHDXs that I put into the tool. So try it again, but with the latest version, Connor.
Okay, I think that's it for the questions. Has anybody got any other questions for Jim? Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to speak rather than type. Nope.
Just hi, this is Ilkin. Jim, regarding the shrinking the disks, are they should be offline, or they can be still, if they're logged users on using that VHD files, will we still try to shrink them? Or
if those VHD files are mounted, I will ignore them. There is no way to do anything to those VHD files whilst they're mounted and in use. So it will just pass them over. And in the CSV file, it will say that disk is locked, so so it doesn't do anything.
so it can be run actually on a storage account if it's Azure file share, SMB share.
Yep.
Can be mapped and run against it, right?
Yep. Yeah. All it needs is a UNC path to run, and admin rights on the VM you're running it from.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
I find it's generally best to run it, obviously, when the environment's less in use, normally, i.e. on a Sunday morning or something, when users aren't connected or not in connected mode and disconnected and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, if you've got maintenance hours, then schedule it to run then, right? Because you'll get the best bang for your buck by users not being logged on, and then you'll be able to shrink their stuff.
Hey, Jim, just out of curiosity, don't know if I'm jumping ahead here, but would the shrink disk work on MSIX Epitach VHDX?
It will work on any VHD or VHDX as long as they have a basic partition in them, okay. Which is not always the case. There are certain unique ways to create VHDs where they don't have a basic partition, but I only test it on disks created by FSLogix. But it should work on other types of VHDs or VHDXs as well.
But you wouldn't necessarily run it against like a VHDX for a VM.
So you'd have to have the VM off, and
yeah.
But you could do. But bear in mind, I do not test any of this stuff.
Okay.
So if it breaks all your shit, then don't come crying to me.
Oh no, of course.
Okay, good. Any more questions before we move on to our next guest? Nope. Okay. Samit, are you there?
Yeah, can you guys see and hear me?
Yep, we can, loud and clear.
Fabulous. Here we
Okay.
go.
The floor is all yours.
Thanks, Neil. So Jim's always a tough one to follow because he goes over 17 things, and I'm just going to go over one today in terms of the application world. Just for those of you that are not familiar with Remo 3 or myself, Samit Halvadia, I'm CTO at Remo 3, and I've spent the majority of my life in the application management space specific to the enterprise. So started my career at Install Shield, was the product manager for Admin Studio around the time that Softricity was acquired by Microsoft, and have kind of been in the packaging and package management world ever since. Started off the North American part of AppDNA, which we ultimately exited to Citrix, where I stayed for 8 years, and recently just left after I was running worldwide pre-sales there and strategy to join Remo 3. So everything I've done in the last basically 20 years has really been focused around delivering, onboarding, and managing applications effectively in a continuously changing environment. So everything that we're going to talk about today around Remo 3 is really focused on what can I do as we move and migrate and manage WVD environments to ensure that our applications are functioning properly and that we have the most modern and latest and greatest version of the applications and the OSs, as we talked about with the image management portion that Jim had outlined. But before we go into actual slides, I didn't really create slides that are specific to this, but I thought it would be important to understand what Remo 3 does for a living and why we're here talking about application management and MSIX today. And from that perspective, for those of you that aren't familiar with Remo 3, I'll give you a really high-level overview. So if I were to put this into a nutshell, what Remo 3 has been able to do is take kind of where AppDNA had stopped around static analysis and application testing and take it kind of to that next 2.0, 3.0 phase, which was saying, you know what, beyond static compatibility testing, we need to start understanding with continuous updates from Microsoft, 2 feature block releases of Windows a year, as well as cumulative updates. Are my applications going to perform in a meaningful way that my users will have a great experience? So what we had developed was a fully automated platform that prior to deploying an application, we would give our customers and our partners the insight around understanding, okay, will the application install? Is it compatible? Will the application function? So when we execute that application, do all the child processes work the way that they're supposed to? And then will it work well? Which is, from a performance perspective, if I move from 1809 sitting in WVD to 1909 sitting in WVD, is my application experience going to be better, worse, or the same? To start giving people data sets to make informed application delivery decisions to ensure that your applications are getting to the right user on the right platform in the right format. So I just quickly want to show you that, you know, from a demo perspective, I'm not as clever as Jim, so I'm not going to go through and record demos. I'm going to do them live because it's way more exciting that way. So I'll pull up a demo of our intelligent smoke test, which will give you some insight into exactly how we execute these applications and get this level of automated testing to make decisions around how to deploy the apps. So if I pull up my full screen from a sharing perspective, bear with me, share the whole screen. What I can do is I can come into the Remo 3 dashboard, and what's important to understand here is that the first thing I'm going to do here is understand whether or not a subset of my applications can work, are good candidates to deploy into WVD in their current format. They could be MSIs, they could be app V packages, they could be AppX containers, they could be legacy setups with silent switches around, they could be PowerShell scripts around any type of traditional application wrappers. Doesn't matter. As long as it installs silently, or we have the capability to install it silently, we can execute that application. So from the perspective of the automated testing, what we do is we follow a 3-step process, right? Number one, we're going to take your image that you want to test against. So it's not a generic image. We need to understand whether it's going to work on your version or a customer's version of 1909. As Jim mentioned, when you talk about gold images, they are departmental, they are regional, sometimes interdepartmental, right? I mean, I've seen finance organizations have 5 different gold images just because of the fact that, you know, wealth management thinks that they're special, or someone else thinks that they need something that no one else really understands. So the image proliferation that happens means that when you're testing these applications, the question that we're really looking to answer is your version of your application going to work in your environment? So when we're doing the testing, it's a contextually relevant test to make sure that we point to your gold image that you want to test and deploy that application to and test accordingly. So hooking into Endpoint Manager, hooking into SCC or Config Manager, what we're able to do is pull out the actual applications and go through a discovery process that's completely automated, right? Once we import these applications into the Remo platform, we're able to go through a testing process, which again is fully automated, where we install the application and create a recorded video and output so that you can get a log to make sure that you understand what happened during the installation. That's the compatibility bit. Did it install properly? And the second bit's going to be around the actual smoke test itself, which is now that we've installed it successfully, we're going to actually launch the executable and follow all the children processes underneath and see whether they respond the way that we think that they should. So if you see something like Google Chrome, you're going to start seeing that there's a lot of various interesting clicks that end up happening throughout the duration of the smoke test. And again, this isn't surface automation. This isn't RPA. This is just us understanding that when a new application process is spawned out of the parent process, that is probably functional to that overall application. And we come to the determination of whether or not during the smoke test, the application behaved the way that it should have behaved. So that's the functionality, right? So we've installed the application, answered the compatibility question, then we've smoke tested the application, and we've answered the does it function question. And then the last bit is really around the performance, where I can come in and say, okay, well, I'm moving from 1809 to 1909. Is my application going to perform better, worse, or the same? And that's kind of where we get into the data around, okay, number one, what does my CPU utilization look like on 1809 versus 1909? Number two, my memory utilization. Is it better on 1809? Is it worse on 1909? Number three, my network utilization, vGPU, disk read-write. And this is all what we're pulling out pre-deployment, prior to ever deploying the application and sending it in their environment. So we're not doing the work that Lakeside is doing. Huh? Is everyone else seeing a wheel?
Yeah, I think your session timed out, Samit.
Oh, did it? See, that's exactly right. That's the exciting part of doing live demos, guys.
Trust me, recording videos doesn't always work, mate.
So let me pull it back. If I go back into Google here, into Chrome, what we're going to see is, which one did I do? This one. So if I go back into Google Chrome and look at the performance bit that I was talking about, I'm able to actually start understanding exactly what type of performance and utilization that I need when I'm onboarding this application from a compute perspective into WVD, or whether I'm doing it on-prem, right? So if I look at, my 1909 versus something like my 1809, you can do comparisons against different runs to see whether or not your application is going to work, in a more efficient way or in a less efficient way, and start making determinations around what's the best way to actually deploy the application, right? So if I go into 1809, I can start doing some unique comparisons where I look at Google Chrome. The blue line is 1809, the red line is 1909, and for all intents and purposes, the performance is about the same, right? So I don't have to worry about the fact that just because I'm moving from an on-prem 1809 to a WVD 1909, that there's going to be any type of degradation of performance, which is often a question of, if I'm moving to a public cloud or things like that, instead of kind of listening to hearsay and blog posts, really what we want to start understanding is, let's make data-driven decisions on what's the best way to get this application out the door. So from the perspective of what we do from a core functionality perspective, it's really around testing these applications without ever bothering your subject matter experts or your application owners. And to Jim's point earlier, if it takes 1 to 3 months to patch and stay, any type of image that you have today from an OS perspective, wouldn't it be great if every cumulative update that you rolled out, you were able to just automatically instantiate a test across your application portfolio and say, here's my May cumulative update across 25 images. Is it going to break anything in my application portfolio? Here's my June. So from the perspective of the ongoing management, once we've tested the applications and deployed them successfully, we want to ensure that they're working in their best state possible. And that's where that management component kind of comes into play. So I wanted to level set what we do for a living and how we get there before we talk about modernization and the process as it pertains to MSIX. Neil, I don't know if this is a good time to ask questions about the core functionality or whether to go straight into MSIX. And
well, we've actually got a question from Paul Smith. He said, how does testing an application work where access to backend components such as SQL DBs are required?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? So because it's contextually relevant, if you have a backend component where you have connectors already built in, middlewares, JREs, things that are part of your gold image, you have the ability to test against them, right? Because again, the contextually relevant is important. It's not like you're uploading your application to a website, someone's testing it against a vanilla image. You should have your backend infrastructure, assuming that you have connectivity or middleware components or package dependencies defined in Config Manager, you'd be able to test against all those different bits.
Good. And a question for me as well. When I'm working with customers, obviously when we start talking about multi-session and applications, a common question that I always get is, how do I know that my application is still going to perform well in a multi-user environment, as in multiple people using it on the same host at the same time? Does your tool support that functionality? As in, can I say, can 5 users at once, for example, use the application and look at the performance?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So from an intelligent smoke test perspective, we can instantiate multiple intelligent smoke tests to simulate 5, 6, 7 users running it. So the answer is yes, we can support it. The other bad half of the answer is we don't have a way to display it effectively at the moment. With WVD, with the fact that we are moving towards a multi-session world, that's one of our top priorities, to figure out what's the best way to expose the data. Because we can collect the data, we don't know how to expose it at the moment in a meaningful way.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so part of what you'll see with Remo 3 Cloud that we'll be releasing in October, and I'll give you a little bit more insight into that, is that we are looking at kind of creating, from a discovery standpoint, we want to answer 4 questions. Number 1, in its current format, is it a suitable candidate for WVD? So can I just lift it and shift it into WVD, no problems, no questions asked? Number 2, is it multi-session friendly? And number 3, is it a good candidate for modernization? Meaning, can I convert it to MSIX without a heavy lift? Right? Those are the 3 components that we're going to answer right off the bat. And then the 4th one that I was alluding to is, if it's an exception, what do I do about it? Right? What do I do next if it's not a good candidate for any of those 3 things? Which is kind of the guidance engine that we want to provide when you are onboarding applications into WVD. So let's talk about taking that capability that we have today in terms of understanding application behavior because of the automated testing, and apply it to the concept of application modernization. And I refuse to call it conversion, because conversion is one of 5 steps in my mind as it pertains to modernization. The way that we approach this, and we were fortunate enough to be able to sit down alongside the MSIX engineering team, Andrew Clinic and John Vincel and those guys, sit down with David James from the SCCM team and get walked into a customer to see whether or not we could start automating a big chunk of the workflow as it pertained to application modernization. This particular customer wanted to move their applications to MSIX, move them into Intune, and ultimately deploy them in WVD over time. The challenge that they had was they didn't know where to get started with MSIX. And the reality is, we're really good at converting, but what we found the first challenge to be was discovery. And what I mean by discovery is, what were the applications that were good candidates for MSIX? And as part of the feedback from that proof of concept or technical customer validation that we did, was we actually built out a fully functional intelligent discovery capability, because we saw that that was almost as important as the conversion itself. We started with a subset of nearly 200 packages, and by the time we actually went through the discovery process, leveraging the platform, we found that only 114 of these applications were suitable candidates or supported by the MSIX format. Browser plugins had to be discarded. Font packs without executables had to be discarded. Applications without shortcuts or executables had to be discarded. Low-level drivers that were part of applications that were bundled in poorly had to be discarded, right? So what we found is that instead of going through the conversion process and then banging your head against the wall, we were able to weed out the unsuitable candidates right off the bat, leveraging that discovery. And then we took it one step further, right? Which is, because we have this smoke test, let's take the applications that are good candidates and ensure that they run on a modern platform. So as part of this fully automated 5-step process, we've gone through this discovery, discarded the unsuitable candidates. Then we go through the next phase of rationalization, which is that pre-conversion smoke test. So from a pre-conversion smoke test, we go through the process of saying, will this application in its current form run on your desired target environment of 2004, your finance build, 2004, your Korean build, whatever the case might be, right? So we, again, run that smoke test that you've seen with the installation, the actual intelligent smoke test, capture all the data that we need to run the performance, functionality, compatibility, and say, yes, this is absolutely an application that works in your desired environment. Let's move it on to conversion. If it doesn't, then we go back to the customer and they have to get engaged to say, you know what, maybe we rationalize this. Is this something we retire? Is it something we replace? Is it something we remediate, right? So if it's an application with a low-level driver, what happens if we take that driver out, install it as part of the gold image, and then MSIX the rest of the application? Are you okay with that, right? Or is it something that just completely gets retired because it's not a relevant application anymore to the business? And then once we've gone through that process, we actually kick off the conversion utility. And we're just using the Microsoft CLI conversion utility for MSIX. And we go through the conversion itself. And as part of that, once we go through the conversion, we run the post-conversion smoke test. So now that we've actually created the MSIX, we spin up that same 2004 image that you want to deploy to, sitting up in WVD, and then run the smoke test on that application, the MSIX itself. And if we find that there's something wrong with that application, we go through an automated remediation process. And that automated remediation process is currently in phase 1.5 out of 3. The first couple of things that we do is really kind of focus on fixing in code. So things that we've seen with interactions with Explorer.exe, or PowerShell wrappers that don't have any command line parameters, or some file redirection. Those are things that we're able to fix right off the bat. And that's kind of doubled up the percentage. We're sitting around 80% in terms of our conversion success rate as it pertains to what we deem suitable candidates for MSIX conversion. So we were able to go through that process and start remediating a lot of these applications. Our next phase, which we started, is applying PSF to the applications as well. But instead of applying 20 PSFs to try to blanket an entire fix that might work for an application, we're starting to look at events inside the application smoke test that we might be able to say, you know what, that's interesting. Out of the 400,000 events, these 20 events might have caused an issue. Leveraging the concept of intelligent classifier to say, now we can do targeted PSF fixes. I think it's one of these 20 that's causing the issue. And that we've started deploying some of these targeted fixes, which has gotten us to about 84% on average in terms of the conversion success. And then ultimately, we want to move away from that to go straight intelligent classifier, which is going to be around just collecting more and more bits of data and then leveraging the concept of supervised learning to start applying remediations where it makes sense. So from the perspective of kind of going through that entire process, we've done the intelligent discovery, we do the pre-conversion testing, and then of course the conversion and remediation and the post-conversion testing. And ultimately what you're left with at the end of it is a deployment quality MSIX. Now, this is where we kind of hand it off to the customer at the moment and say, if you're ready and you are willing to go towards MSIX app attach, this is where we can start helping you get to that journey, right? But right now, it's very much focused on taking that first step, which is let's take advantage of the containerization in its current form, right? The value of MSIX is it's one format to rule them all at the moment, right? It's great for physical, it's great for virtual, it's great for cloud-based. So we're going to help you get there, and then ultimately you can get to the nirvana of app attach. But during that process, right, what we found is that when you deploy these MSIXs, we still need to do the ongoing image management and application management associated with testing them on a monthly basis, a weekly basis sometimes, or a quarterly basis, depending on how advanced customer organizations are as they pertain to staying in compliance and governance. So from a continuous deployment standpoint, what we found is that just invoking that test every Patch Tuesday and coming back in, we actually have a couple of partners that have created like a CI/CD pipeline where they're leveraging our platform or SolarWinds to pull down the patches from WSUS, install them on their images, invoke the active platform, and on Wednesday come in and see how it performed against their gold images, which is really cool. It's beyond the scope of anything that we do right out of the box, but it's great to see people kind of building CI/CD components around the ecosystem here. So from our perspective, it's around discovering the applications, figuring out which ones are suitable candidates to modernize or move to WVD. Then we go through the process of actually modernizing them and testing them to ensure that we're creating deployment quality MSIXs, and then handing them off and managing them from an ongoing testing perspective as you update your images, as you update your application portfolio. So with that being said, I'll show you the capabilities as they pertain. Let's hope this hasn't also timed out here. Yep. While I log in, any questions about this, about what I just went through?
There's no questions in the chat window.
Okay.
There is one. Why would an app not be a good candidate for WVD based on what logic versus an unknown WVD build? Would the smoke test not be completed under UAT and run automation against the build? Interested to understand from Ryan. I'm not sure I understand your question there, Ryan.
Yeah, can you give me a little bit? Yeah.
Ryan, do you know what unmute?
Yeah, sorry for the delay. I was trying to eat my tea at the same time. So basically, we've got a number of customers who are migrating to Windows Virtual Desktop. And just so we understand it, what they do for their UAT process is they effectively have a UAT WVD environment, and they will, deploy capture and install and run as usual using things like Avanti in the environment. And obviously, that is a smoke test for them, and then they move over. What I'm trying to understand is what value does this offer against doing a UAT test? Because you'd still, even though you're using this, you'd still do a UAT test, would you not?
Well, that depends, right? So having done this for a very, very long time, what we typically find is, number one, not everyone will even smoke test, which is a little embarrassing. But, for the majority of organizations, let's call them Fortune 500, you're going to run into situations where they will smoke test. And the fact that this is completely automated, they'll smoke test about 85% of their applications, and that's good enough, right? If you're looking at that. And then if you look at the top 15% that might be business critical, they might go to a subject matter expert and ask them to execute a UAT that's slightly more in depth. Now, we do have the capability to work with RPA like Ranorex and some of those other tools that are out there to record and orchestrate UATs inside of this platform. But again, my goal is to say, I want to answer a bigger question, which is, how do I move the majority of my applications with the least amount of effort?
So would you say this is positioned more at the larger, let's say 1,000 to 10,000 app deployments, like say the banks and organizations like that, or can this be used across the board for all businesses? Where would you see this really taking the best effect?
Yeah, I think with the right systems integrated and the right partner, it could go across the board. In its current format, like you're seeing right now, this is obviously an enterprise-centric tool. I alluded to the fact that we're going to be releasing Remo 3 Cloud for partners as well as for the SMB, which will give them the ability to upload their VHD images as well as their applications in the first iteration. And it'll be hosted on Azure, and we will do the orchestration for them, leveraging this same platform. So ultimately, we want to bring WVD to the masses and bring MSIX to the masses. But in its current state, it's been much more geared towards enterprise.
Cool. Thanks very much, Samit, for answering my questions.
Sure. So if we take a look at kind of what the process looks like from a customer perspective or from a partner perspective, here's a subset of 50 applications that we pulled from AppGet and started running them through our conversion utility, right? So you'll see that this is not a particularly sexy UI. We're not here from a reporting perspective. Partners can build beautiful reports on top of this. What we are good at is understanding what application behavior looks like. So if I go through the process of understanding kind of, okay, what do I need to do to convert this application? We went through, and it's a pretty straightforward process, right? Take a look at the if the application passes the intelligent discovery and it's a suitable candidate, then we're going to go ahead and install it on 2004 or whatever image that you want to deploy to. It could be 1909, whatever. We're going to install that package. Then we're going to smoke test it to make sure that it works. If it doesn't work, even if it installs and it doesn't work, we're not going to go through the conversion process because it's wasting your time. So this AppV package, we're running through the actual smoke test. It passed. We restore that image again, and then we convert the package using the command line interface conversion utility. Restore that machine again, install the MSIX package, and bang, smoke test the MSIX. If that passes, then we're in a situation where we give that with some authority. This is Remo 3 certified. Feel free to hand it off to your application owner, and they can choose what to do next, right? So to Eric's point earlier, I believe it was, what should I UAT this? Well, if it's a business critical application and that gives you a peace of mind, go for it. If not, go ahead and deploy it and see how it goes. So of the 114 that we converted and passed over to this customer, 114 of them were deployment quality. They actually UAT'd every single one of the packages that we had created. The other cool thing that if you look at is error tracing in MSIX is hard. Traditional packaging skill sets require updating, if you will, to start doing root cause analysis around why something failed in an MSIX. It's not as clean as, people, we have 20 years of knowledge as it pertains to MSI, 22 years of knowledge. MSIX is fairly new. So part of the root cause analysis that we do, you look at something like this, which is CD Burner XP. You can tell right there from the name that that's a pretty old application. But we found that it actually was a suitable candidate for MSIX. It's supported by Microsoft. It is installing on a 2004 image without any issues. We smoke tested it. All of the children processes from CD, CDB, XPP, XE, they all started properly. They were all responsive. We had no issues with our interesting clicks. And then we ended that task. It converted without an issue. It installed as an MSIX package without an issue. So at this point, a lot of people just stop. And they're like, great, MSIX, on to the next one. But what we found was that when we did the post-conversion smoke test, we ran into a situation where typically you'd capture the video and the output screens, but it's been over the allowed threshold. We only hold the videos for 3 days or whatever. So if you take a look, we can find that actually the request was aborted because it could not create an SSL TLS secure channel. Meaning that actually that's weird because it worked when it tried to connect during the initial smoke test as an MSI package, but it didn't work as a MSIX. Well, here you can tell it's just a simple file redirection to read an area of the VFS where they would actually be able to go ahead and say, oh, that's where I need to connect to. right? Now we've figured out a way to actually do that file redirection in our automated remediations ourselves. But it's interesting that we were able to find out that conversion, installation, no issues. During the smoke test, we ran into an issue from a connection perspective, but it was a pretty simple one to fix. Again, as we go through that entire 5-step process, what I do want to call out is that upon a failure, it will notify you, but it's going to keep going. There's no stopping and having to watch this, to figure out, okay, if it failed on the XP, CD burner XP, do I have to re-invoke the process and start kicking it off again? No. If you leave over the weekend, like this took 7.5 hours to convert, 50 applications. So it is a thorough process. It takes on average about 18 to 20 minutes an application to go through all 5 steps, depending on how big the application is, how long the installation is, how thorough the smoke test is. But it is actually going through the process of installation, testing, conversion, and then testing again. So that at the end of it, it's not like we did some type of magic in the background and did, table mapping to try to do a direct conversion. This is a full-on, we know that we have a quality package at the end of this. So I'm going to stop there. I mean, it's not rocket science here, but I think the thing to understand about the overall process here is based on the fact that we have an understanding of application behavior because of the intelligent smoke test. We've been able to work alongside the Microsoft development team, alongside folks like Jim, to kind of just get validation from the field as we go through this process. Is this going to provide value to customers? Is it going to provide value to partners? And if there are things that we should be doing better, we're open to that feedback before we go GA on the 20th of October.
Okay, that was a really good presentation.
I'm glad. I mean, just on a side note for that as well, if people do have interest in bringing potential customers and trying this out for their applications, we're happy to have you reach out directly to us. Let me be a good marketing person. Otherwise, my marketing manager will kill me. I'll send the deck out with the link where you can ask us for a demo. And we'll go through the process of helping you convert a couple of applications, making your customers feel comfortable with it, understanding a little bit more about the process and whether or not there's an opportunity for the partners out there to actually build out a service line offering around application modernization.
Great stuff. I can see the power of this. Obviously, we all know MSX Appetite is going to be hugely popular, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're migrating over to WVD. I mean, if you pick an average enterprise which has got 1,000 applications, we all know, we've all worked in those environments where the application repackaging and testing takes up majority of your project timeline, right? I've worked on projects where the applications have taken more than 6 months alone just to do your applications. So to have something like this, which can essentially automate a large portion of that work, which does the legwork for you, is going to be a massive time, effort, and cost savings anyone has, right?
Well, that's the thing. A lot of folks don't know exactly what's coming down, right? I was talking to Stefan yesterday, and he said that there's a giant wave coming, and MSIX AppAttach is a wonderful technology, and that is the ultimate portability, scalability, future-proofing, whatever nirvana you want to call it. What people don't realize is that you're not just going to be able to move from your existing application portfolio into this nirvana. There's going to be work associated with it, right? And that's kind of the problem that we wanted to step in and solve.
Yep, absolutely. So has anyone got any questions they want to ask me?
Hey, it's Jim. How you doing, man?
Hey, Jim.
This would be lovely to sort of tie in with an Azure DevOps CI/CD pipeline, so you could have that sort of thing going on. It's like, you got my image builder stuff, and then your stuff in the customizations. You get new apps. You tie it into the DevOps pipeline. That would be brilliant.
It's amazing to see what other partners have done, just even with the cumulative updates, right? I'm with you, Jim. Like there's an opportunity to truly create an enterprise fit for use DevOps methodology around image building, image management, application building, application deployment, and then application management. It's just that I don't know that anyone's seen the problem or taken the initiative to say, let's stitch this together.
Yeah. It's I always find when you're talking about DevOps tooling, particularly to sysadmins, it's like, hang on, isn't this for developers? I don't write code. I manage boxes, and I think that attitude, thankfully, is changing. If you look at anybody who's managing WVD, if you're not thinking about infrastructure as code, then in my opinion, you're doing it wrong.
Right. We should figure out, Jim, if there's a way to start. I mean, because I've been communicating with Tom as well on the call, and I think that there's a way to actually drive a bigger outcome than just application modernization, like the entire ecosystem. I'm just not the guy that knows image builder and all those different components well enough. I understand the apps inherently. So if there's a way to kind of start thinking about what's the right way to make this even more effective or a more compelling outcome for the users and for the partner community, we're all ears.
Yeah, let's take that offline. Probably not a chat for this forum, but yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions? Any other questions in general? Nope. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for that, Samit. And Jim, also thank you very much for your session. It was both very, very good sessions, lots of useful info.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thanks for the invite. This was great.
Good. Well, if no one else has got any other questions, last chance. Nope. Okay. We're going to end it here. So this recording is going to be made available on YouTube, so you can rewatch it. So I'll post a link out when it's published. It'll probably be tomorrow. I've still got lots of work to do tonight. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining. It's been a pleasure as always. And also, just so you know, Ignite registrations just opened. So get yourself signed up for that. I think that's about 3 weeks away. We're hoping there'll be some very good WVD announcements there. So the next meeting will be obviously in October. The date will be October the 8th. October the 1st, sorry. And obviously that will be a Ignite special, hopefully, where we can talk about what was announced at Ignite and maybe do some demos and stuff. So yeah, also this is a community event. If you want to submit a session, reach out to me or Kirk. We'll get you booked in. And if you've got any questions, feel free to ask away. So, okay, we'll end it there, guys. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thanks for setting it up, Neil. This is great.
No worries. Okay.
Cheers, everyone.
Goodbye.
Cheers.